A couple things, practice. People ask me a lot about how to study. I don't know how it works for you, but I can give you some feedback from other students and also offer some different ways to help that I think help a few students, maybe it'll help you. And that is when you email me questions, because I'm a visual learner, it's hard for me to be on the same page with what you're asking, because I want to make sure I'm answering what you're specifically asking. So if you do have a question about a scenario, tag me on social media, like tag me on Twitter, tag me on Instagram. I know Facebook is mostly for old people, but tag me and then say, hey, this picture we're studying, and we think this is abduction, or we think the muscles that we're working are this. And that way I can literally see what you're seeing and then reply with, yes, that's right, or look at it again, or, you know. So that's a good way that if y'all are in study groups and you just kind of want to have an answer immediately, just tag me and I can see what you're seeing and we could be on the same page, and then I can either confirm or say, take another look at it. I'm never going to embarrass you. I'm never going to be like, oh my God, what were you thinking? That's not what this is about. You know, mistakes happen. I make them every day. This is about trying to get you real-time answers to questions that if it's just written, it's hard for me to see what you're asking, okay? So feel free to do that. Ooh, all right. Today is, I don't say it's a tough day, but it's one that I kind of get nervous about. I look forward to it, but I get nervous about it because it is a little different. So what we have so far is we understand that muscles work for reasons, right? They do jobs for reasons. Muscles don't turn on unless they have to turn on. Even when someone gets hurt and their muscles are spasmed up, that's a reason. There's hypermobility, or they need to splint a certain, you know, athletic trainers, we have splints, right? We have vacuum splints. Well, your body has natural splints. I'm not saying they're as effective as vacuum splints. They came around, but back in our day, swelling is nature's splint. And muscle spasms are nature's splint. When people's backs lock up, that's their body saying, we don't want you to move right now because there's something going on, okay? So muscles contract above resting tone to do a job. And what we are specifically looking at is that job of influencing motion, whether it's to cause motion, prevent motion, or allow motion. Okay. So on Friday, we did prevent motion. We did a lot of isometric analogies where I taught you to figure out who's working. You got to ask yourself, why are they working? What are the external influences? Most of the time it's gravity, but gravity pulling on plates tugging on cable redirecting with cables. I mean, the influence could be across, you know, if you're on a fly machine, it could be pulling your arm out in this way, and it could be trying to raise it up that way. So it's whatever the external force is trying to do to that joint. And you say, well, if the external force is trying to take me this way, and I'm not moving, then that must mean I have to be using muscles that pull the other way to prevent it. Because again, if you have two forces pulling in the same direction with nothing on the other side, you move it, right? Feet, and you got two teams pulling on one rope with nothing on the other side, that rope is going to move. And that is a majority of our life. I'm not saying there's not exceptions to the rules, but a majority of motion is external forces trying to take me one way, I have to move muscles that pull in the other direction. Today we're going to piggyback on that and talk about, once we establish who's working because of why they're working, then we're going to incorporate motion to it. And I'm going to show you how contraction type or work, physiological work, can be proven with our simple A plus B is equal to C equation. So, let me log back in, and give our first example. All right. Once again, there's a rule, I think I'm going to name it Campbell's rule, that no professional photograph of someone doing exercise can ever look natural and normal, right? You can try, but it's always, it's just kind of, like, have you ever gone into the weight room and seen, yay? So, first of all, let's look for the clues. Guys, we have to have data. You know, in math, algebra, trigonometry, it was always like givens. Do you remember that in school? It's like, here's your givens. You know, X is this and Y is that. You gotta write down what you know before you can kind of figure out maybe what you don't know. So what do we know about this scenario? First thing I'm going to do is establish who's working. And I'm going to establish that by understanding why it's working. That machine, whatever you want to call it, guys, a curl machine, but you could call it Fred for all I care. Fred is trying to extend his elbows. Does everybody understand that? Yeah. If he turned off, we could do a simple experiment to prove it. If he turned off all of his muscles, that's what would happen. Because that's what the exercise is trying to do to him. So, since the machine or the exercise equipment is trying to extend him, the last thing he needs is the group of muscles that pull in that same direction. He probably hurt himself by using the extensors plus the machine trying to extend him. That doesn't sound very smart. So, I know he is going to need flexors. And why don't we say biceps? Because that's just one of several muscles that are doing that job. It's a team of muscles. It's not just one muscle. Okay? The elbow flexors are doing a job. And we know, I try to use this as proof, why we shouldn't say that flexors are involved in flexion. Because sometimes my extensors are involved in flexion, and sometimes those are working and there's no motion at all. So if you always say bicep is responsible for flexion, you're going to be wrong 66% of the time. It's not about motion, it's about pull. It's about direction of pull. Yes? Okay. I teach through redundancy. I'm trying to reprogram your brain to let go of what you think. I'm going to say it so many times, it's going to make you sick. But that's how important this is. So now what we're going to do is we're going to identify what our agonistic group is. Chalk. The elbow flexors. And that was A of our equation, right? Identifying the agonist. Who's working because we understand why they need to work. The second thing we're going to do is identify the motion. Now, you may say, well, maybe there is no motion. Okay, fair enough. But eventually there's going to be some motion. And on the test, I'm going to tell you what motion. Or I'll use layman's terms like he lowers the weight down or he brings the weight up, depending on the exercise. But for now, to avoid any ambiguity, I'm just going to say, he begins to flex his elbows. You observe elbow flexion from that position. Almost swallowed my cough drop. In other words, let's pretend this is a video and I had it on pause. And I press play and you observe flexion. Now let's think about what that means. The elbow flexors are on above resting tone because they're doing a job, and I observe flexion. Elbow flexors being responsible for flexion, causing motion in the direction of the muscle's pull, doing what it's trying to do, causing motion in the direction of flexion by the flexors. That sounds like concentric work to me. Shortening while trying to shorten above resting tone, doing what it's trying to do. But the key thing is that concentric work isn't just proven because of motion. Because again, if I'm working my elbow extensors up here, I'm going to have flexion as well. It's not about the flexion. It's about the flexors working to cause flexion. When you have flexors being responsible for flexion, you get concentric work or concentric contraction. Contraction types are proven. You look at the final score and you can see which team won. You look at the final score to see which team lost. If you don't have that information, you won't know who won or lost. You look at the score and you say, oh, I need the flexors. Oh, I observe flexion. That must be. It is. It's math. Positive 4 has to equal positive 4. Positive 4 cannot equal negative 4. I mean, that's as simple as it is in biomechanics. It must be. When the group of muscles are working, because you identify why they're working, and they create motion in their direction of pull, it has to be concentric work. There's no exception. Now, let's rewind. Starting in this position, pretend. Pretend. I press play, and you observe extension. Now, this is where students have a tough time. It's okay, it's understandable. My job is to work you through it. Just because you observe extension doesn't mean the flexors aren't still working. And you know why I know the flexors are still working? Because that machine is still trying to extend you. That machine didn't stop extending you. There's a phrase in your book that I think is very important for you to understand. For majority of it, especially exercises, if you're in a machine, if you're doing exercises, this is going to always be the case. For the same external force that's trying to move you, you're going to be working the same agonistic group. In other words, the reason never changed. The variations in the motion you observe is because of the variations in the contractions, the type of work. That's what's going to make you go up or down, or flex and extend. It's not that you're going to call upon different muscles in this exercise. It's that the flexors who are working the whole time, because the external force is trying to extend you the whole time, is going to change the contraction type in order to make you flex or let you extend. And that's the bottom line. All right, no 90s pressing fins. It's all good. If I observe extension in this exercise, notice I'm not saying every time you observe flexion, every time. No, it's for this scenario that we've identified what our agonist is. In this scenario, where my flexors are doing a job, when I observe flexion, it has to be through concentric work. And under this scenario, where my flexors are doing a job, if I observe extension, it must be through eccentric work. It has to be. Because if you think about it, if flexors pull in the direction of flexion, when there's extension, they are being lengthened. And when there's flexion, they are shortening. The key thing is that being lengthened, shortening, while doing a job. Yay, he's happy. I think he's happy because he understands, it kind of looks like Marcus Colson for those things. He understands that you guys understand, and that makes him happy. All right, let's do another scenario. See if I can find one in the middle. That's not bad right there. Something in the middle. Well, I can work off this. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Campbell's rule? Look how unnatural that is. Yeah, I know what you did. Okay, guys. So, if movement is messing with you, so what's great about any movie you're watching outside of movie theaters, if you own it, whether you have the DVD or Vudu or any of that, you can pause it. You know, You can always pause it, you rewind. You can pause it, wait, let me establish some givens first, and then unpause it and see the motion. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, why do his muscles need to work? The TheraBand or the cable, as well as gravity, is trying to adduct his shoulders. He doesn't need his adductor group. He doesn't need the muscles that pull in that same direction. He needs abductors. He needs muscles that pull out. And what are those muscles? Who cares? It's just the concept. We're going to get to them in the next class. But it's the concept that you have muscles that pull in every direction of motion. He doesn't need muscles that are pulling down. He needs muscles that are pulling up. Because gravity and the cable are trying to pull him down. Yes? Now, what if, so we've established agonist equals abductors. It's bilateral shoulder abductors, the muscles that pull in that direction. Who are they? Who cares? For now, I just have to understand that I have muscles that pull in every direction of motion, and I need abductors to hold my arms in. Now, what if I said, what type of work or contraction from those said muscles got him to this position in the frontal plane? So, meaning that I went up to that position in order to hold it. The elevator went up in order to stay in the same position so people could get out, people could come on. Do you have enough information to answer what type of work? Yo, this is like kinesiology clue. Remember that game where you had to figure out who did it, how they do it, where they do it? Professor Plum, candlestick in the kitchen, that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. Who did it? What group of muscles is doing the job? How did they do it? What type of work was responsible for the job that they were doing? Concentric work, eccentric work, isometric. It's kind of the game we're playing. So to bring him up to that position, we don't guess concentric or eccentric. We know whether it's concentric or eccentric. Who's my group doing a job? The abductors. What motion do I observe when he brings it up? Abduction. The only way the abductors can do a job and create abduction is through concentric work. Like, that's so easy. It follows a sentence. The only way the abductors, while working above resting tone, can be responsible for abduction, the motion that they're pulling in the direction of, is through the concept of concentric contraction. Shortening, while trying to shorten above resting tone. And let's say I start there and I press play and you observe adduction. Again, you're probably not going to observe this when I press play. He already has two things trying to pull him down, and if he used a third thing, his arm would fly into his sides. You may need that if you're trying to do as many jumping jacks as you can. Right? There's a functional reason why you maybe want to go faster than gravity. I use that on Friday when you're trying to get a mosquito. You're not going to be like, oh, you son of a gun. There are functional tasks when you need to go faster than external forces, but the key thing there is go fast. It's going to bring your body fast. So, how do I know that it's eccentric work when I press play and I observe adduction? Because I just read my sentence. First, I identified who's still doing that job. My abductors are still working because that cable and gravity is trying to adduct me. And unless I go faster than what gravity and the external forces can allow, I have to be using muscles in the opposite direction. The analogy is the elevator. Lets you down while still pulling up. If you're holding a bucket of water, you let it down while still pulling up. So my abductors are still working, even though I'm letting it down, because the external force is still trying to bring me there. Abductors are doing a job above resting tone, but I observe adduction. This is how you read it in a sentence. The only way the abductors can be responsible for adduction is through eccentric work. Now, on the test, y'all don't be like, the only way the abductors can be responsible for adduction is through eccentric work. Being lengthened while still pulling above resting tone. This is how the muscles get away with it. The muscles can vary their contraction force. The weight, for the most part, is kind of consistent, but the muscles can choose to be greater, choose to tie, or choose to be less. It's like when I'm playing tug of war with my son. I can choose to win, or I can choose to let him win. The muscles just let off a little bit and let the weight be greater. That's how it happens. All right. I think I said this one already. Hold on. It's saved again. Yep. Twinsies. Okay. A great example of why work, agonist, contraction has nothing to do with motion. It's understanding why I gotta make a phone call to a certain group of muscles to do a job. Just like the curls, this exercise is going to fluctuate between flexion and extension. So again, it has nothing to do with the motion. It's the muscles and how they're working against external forces. First step, I'm going to establish why certain muscles need to be turned on above rest. What is that weight trying to do? Now, gravity is still pulling the weight stack down, but because of pulleys, it's redirecting that force. And the cable is actually pulling up on his hands, right? So if the weight or the cable is trying to pull up on his hands, what motion is it trying to cause at the elbows? Trying to cause flexion. During the curls, it's trying to cause extension. So because this exercise is trying to cause flexion, do we need the flexors? No, you already have something trying to flex you. If he did use the flexors, throw the handle on. No, it's very clear. We need the other group of muscles. We need the extensors, the elbow extensors. And you're like, why don't you just say tricep? It's like, well, are you going to say the inconius after it? There's other muscles there. It's not just triceps. Now again, I don't mind layman terms. When you're working with someone doing some tricep, yeah, that's not a big deal. But for what you guys are going to do for a living, you have to know eventually all the different muscles that do those things. You know, someone comes in with a strain inconius or a contracture to the inconius or an innervation probably, you need to know what that thing does. In other words, you can't be a person who's helping rehab someone and say, these are the muscles I can help with, and if it's not on this list, I'm out. So in biomechanics, we're going to get into the tricep and the other muscles. But for now, it's just the concept that I have more than one muscle that's pulling in the direction of extension. Just like I have more than one muscle that pulls in the direction of all motion we have. Elbow extensors. Now, if you observe no motion, if he's just holding it in this position, looking normal, well then the type of work is pretty obvious, right? What type of work would those extensors be doing? Okay, elbow extensors, and I observe no motion. Elbow extensors preventing motion through isometric work. You can still read it as a sentence. I press play, you observe flexion. I press play, you observe flexion. Can you prove the contraction type? You have enough information. Elbow extensors are working the entire exercise, guys. So if elbow extensors are doing a job, and I observe flexion, the only way the extensors can be responsible for flexion is through eccentric work every day and on holidays and weekends, especially Christmas time. Guys, it reads like a sentence. I press play and I observe extension. My extensors are still doing a job because that machine is still trying to flex me. The only way the extensors can be responsible for extension is through concentric work. See how this works? No pun intended. Some people miss the isometric because your physics minds may be like, well, I don't see any movement. And we have to remember that there's movement inside the muscle. Right? So it's working. He couldn't hold that position all day. So it's not necessarily mechanical work, it's physiological work. Shortening, lengthening, no change. There's movement inside the muscle. All right, let's do a leg one. Legolas. $2,800. Good Lord. Look natural. All right. Can anyone remind me or remind anyone else why I do not like the term leg extension machine? Now, keep in mind, it's not that I have a problem, again, working for lay people. That's okay. And listen, when I say lay people, I'm not saying those people. I'm just saying people that don't have a background schooling in kinesiology, they don't know what all these motions and stuff are. But the problem with calling it leg extension machine is that it forms bad habits, like shoulder shrugs. It forms bad habits. When you say, oh, extension works my quads. And although that's the case in this exercise, not all extension is going to be working quads. You know, sometimes you're going to be extending because of eccentric work of the knee flexors. So it puts that false narrative of muscles in motion. When I observe this motion, it's got to be because of these muscles. And that's not true. Once again, I don't like the term, this muscle, this motion. Because that sets it all the ways. Okay? So, let's do what I taught you to do. Before we get into work, we got to give some givens. What do we know? Well, based off of our second test, understanding all the different motions, we should know that that padding isn't trying to magically, through Jedi forces, pull up on the leg. That padding is trying to push on the leg and push in a direction of knee flexion. The machine is trying to flex the knee. If the person used the knee flexors, you pull your shins away from the padding. That doesn't sound like the intent of the exercise, right? So we should understand that if the machine is trying to flex me, I need to use the muscles that pull in the other direction. I need to use the knee extensors. And why don't you just say quad? That's the same thing. It's the knee extensors. But we're being consistent. What are the quad? We'll learn those in biomechanics. But it's the concept of I need muscles to do a job because something's trying to make me move in another direction. Okay? I press play. Well, first of all, if we just keep it here, she'd be working isometrically to prevent flexion, right? So again, it still reads as a sentence. The knee extensors working isometrically to prevent motion. To keep it still, to prevent flexion, really. Preventing flexion. Preventing the machine from flexing. Press play, I observe extension. It's coming up. Read it like a sentence. My extensors are still working because that machine is still trying to flex me. The only way the knee extensors can be responsible for knee extension is through concentric work. It's that simple. I press play, you observe flexion. Guys, still the extensors. That machine's still trying to flex you. The only way the extensors can be responsible for flexion is to let the flexion happen. through eccentric work. Are we seeing a pattern here? All right? That's all it is. Now again, are there exceptions to the rules? Yeah, but I'm going to teach you how to look for those, and I'm going to teach you why they are. You know, if you're sprinting as fast as you can, obviously gravity can kind of help you extend your shoulder, but you're like, I ain't got time for that. I need to make it happen faster. So there are functional tasks. Someone's not going to try to drive in a nail using their flexors through eccentric work. So in other words, even though you have gravity trying to extend you, that's just not enough kinetic energy. We've got to make it move faster than that. We have to use our extensors in the same direction as the external force trying to extend me. But how often do you do it? It's rare, and it's a functional task. Sometimes your muscles work with gravity, but it's not very often. Let us do another one. Are all these examples helping? Then let us partake in another. Try to find a good midway position if I can. And if I can't, it's all good. Make it work. Ooh, I got one. There we go. Okay, guys, so I'm going to ask the question a different way. First of all, let's look for some clues in the weight stack. We know that the position that he is currently in is not the start position. And you know how I know that? Because magical elevation properties happen to the weight stack, right? When you start an exercise, all those plates are touching, right? So again, there's clues in the weight stack to kind of know that, hey, he's going to be starting with his arms out. That's when the plates are going to be touching. And then he's going to make those plates go away from each other. Then he's going to let the plates go back to each other. So let's infer that he starts here and he brings his hands closer together. And then he holds it for a few seconds for the picture. And then he brings his hands away from each other. So A to B, B to C, C to D. Or we could look at it as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Why don't you discuss this with your neighbor or with the voices in your head? I don't judge. And then we'll discuss it as a class.
It's so much easier than the other shit. Yeah.
The bottom line is only for the so there's two lines. So you see the atrial contraction. There's a little and shoots up. That's where
Yeah, that's the ventricle.
but the line at the bottom is going where you see that second.
Right. I want to know what the second bump is.
I think that second bump is supposed to be
The only thing
atrial relaxation.
Yeah, but that's pressure though, increasing. That's an increasing pressure. So the
Not
only thing I
necessarily
can.
it goes backwards. It's like the T wave or the EKG. The reason why it has this is because the way relaxation is happening is going
All right, guys, if you're comfortable with your partner,
Do with blood.
if you're comfortable with your partner, you can do a simulated experiment where one of you holds your arm out and the other person tries to pry your hands away from each other, because that's what the machine is trying to do, right? And the machine's trying to pry your hands away from each other.
Because it's squeezing the blood.
where the spikes come from the deconvolution.
Don't pull a muscle.
But that's just for EKG though. This has to do with like hydrostatic blood pressure. Like pressure on the blood.
Okay, I'm going to ask I'm gonna ask the content question in a different way. I'm gonna ask it in a different way. What motion in this exercise, notice I'm not saying what motion all the time, for this particular exercise with these particular clues, in this exercise, what type of motion would you observe during the eccentric phase of that exercise? What motion would you observe?
Wait, which one? That's constant.
Horizontal abduction. And how do I know that? Well, it's working the same equation. It's working the same equation, just a little differently. I know that I need to be working my horizontal adductors in this exercise, right? Yes? So if I know A, and I give you C, then you should be able to fill in B. If we figure out that the horizontal adductors are working, and then I ask you about the eccentric work, then you know that I have to be observing horizontal adduction. Because the only way the horizontal adductors can be responsible for horizontal abduction is through eccentric work. Yeah? Right? So the concentric phase, or concentric type of contraction work, I would observe horizontal adduction. Those muscles doing what they're trying to do. Pulling and creating motion in the direction of their pull. Muscles love that. All right. Next up, what if we don't have any external forces? No problem. Y'all have heard of what goes up must come down? Well, if there's no external forces, what speeds up must slow down. Okay? So let's pretend I'm in orbit. And when you're in orbit, you're free falling around. In this case, our astronauts would be free falling around the Earth. And when you're free falling, you're weightless. So it's not just being in outer space. Gravity's still there. It's just when you're free falling to the Earth, constantly free falling, you're weightless. So my point is that imagine if you're free falling and being weightless, and you wanted to move. Well, it would be a process of speeding up motion and then slowing down motion. So I don't have to be free falling to show you this example, that if I did the exercise that I just had, but I had no weight trying to move me in the transverse plane, right? My transverse plane, I have gravity trying to extend me, but nothing's trying to horizontally AB or adduct me. So what speeds up must slow down. I can't push my motion with muscles. I can only create motion with pull force. So in other words, if I want to horizontally abduct from this position, I have to use concentric work to do so. My horizontal abductors are going to speed up my horizontal abduction through concentric work. Now the cool thing is that what speeds up must slow down. And if I don't have an external force to slow me down, my muscles have to slow me down. My horizontal abductors can't pull me to speed me up and then push me to slow me down. So when it comes time to slowing down the motion, I'm going to turn off my gas, in this case my horizontal abductors, and then I'm going to turn on my horizontal adductors to slow down my motion. And then if I want to bring it back, I'm going to use my horizontal adductors to speed it up, and then my horizontal abductors to slow it down. Now, you could slow down motion at the ends of motion, but that's not very safe. And you still have muscles that help the ligaments and the bones to slow you down. There's endpoints, hard endpoints, firm endpoints, soft endpoints. Think of this analogy. If if something loud happened outside, maybe someone is afraid of spiders, like really afraid of spiders, and they see a spider, like, oh my God, and they scream. It's going to get your attention. And in my case, if I hear a loud scream, I'm going to do this. So again, there's no external force trying to make me go either way. So to speed up my right transverse cervical rotation, I'm going to be using right transverse cervical rotators to concentric work. But those same muscles that sped me up can't push me to a stop. Muscles can't pull and push. So speed up right transverse to concentric, then I'm going to turn these off, and then I'm going to slow down right transverse with eccentric muscles pulling in the other direction. And it still reads like a sentence. Speeding up my right transverse cervical rotation, right transverse cervical rotators do concentric work. Slowing down my right transverse cervical rotation using the left transverse cervical rotators do eccentric work. So it always can follow that sentence. Speeding up and slowing down motion in the absence of external forces. Or another example would be if I was just laying my arm on the ground and I wanted to speed up extension, I have to shorten while trying to shorten my extensors. And if I want to speed up flexion, I have to shorten while trying to shorten flexors. Now I have friction there that can kind of slow me down. So let me get it off and have no friction. Speed up extension, slow down extension. Speed up extension was the extensors do concentric work. Slowing down the extension was the flexors do eccentric work. Anybody shoot basketball? Just me? I don't do it as much anymore because I'm old. But I love basketball. And when I haven't shot in a while, and I go play, you know what's sore? Not my extensors, my flexors. I'm sore here. Because that's what's going to slow down my extension. My flexors do eccentric work. Slowing down my extension so that my bone doesn't smack up against the other bone. That's why when you run sprints and you haven't run in a long time, you may be sore in certain places that you don't expect. Because you're sore where things are slowing down motion through eccentric work. We'll get into why there's more damage involved, but if you think about it, what puts more stress on a rope? Being pulled apart or shorting? When it's being pulled apart, that's when little threads fray. The frayed rope didn't happen because it always shortened. Frayed rope happens when the rope is being pulled apart. Same thing with muscle. Okay? So speeding up and slowing down concepts. We're going to develop that. I'm going to put this back up on the board and we're going to do that stuff on Wednesday. I'm going to explain how muscles speed up, slow down, stay the same, and who's working greater to do. And we're going to go into the rabbit hole a little bit further. Okay? Was today a good day? Yay! All right, we'll see you Wednesday.